In Jujutsu Kaisen, the idea of weakness and strength are not as clear-cut as they can be in other anime and manga. The reason for this is really simple. In Jujutsu Kaisen, there's multiple ways to be strong. There's physical strength, there's curse technique strength, and then there's your intelligence, the ability to plan out things and execute strategies against an opponent. All of these are viable, especially in this world, because take Satoru Gojo. He was the world's strongest sorcerer, and now he's sealed away in a box. Or, if you read the manga, that's worse. But the thing is here is, what about Yuji? I mean, RMC is looking like he is the weakest sorcerer. But is that true? And can we hold him to that given everything that has happened and everything that will happen? So let's get into, is Yuji the weakest sorcerer? Right off the bat, I'm going to go ahead and say at face value, it can look like Yuji is the weakest. He technically doesn't have a lot going for him, at least for most of Jujutsu Kaisen. And here's why. He lacks a curse technique, which is one of his biggest issues. The lack of a curse technique is not a black mark per se in their world. I mean, the black mark is not being able to use any form of cursed energy, but not having a technique definitely puts you down on the bottom rung. And the way to make up for that is really with a lot of training. Now, the funny thing about this is that Yuji does have a lot of training. He has a lot of combat experience. He says he's been always good at fights, and we see that repeatedly throughout the series, and he progresses so quickly whenever it comes to any type of martial arts training. But the problem is that kind of martial arts training for humans is not the same thing as training to fight cursed spirits and sorcerers, and we've seen that again and again and again. Now, the funny thing is that even though we have seen that so often, Yuji continues to adjust to it. He adjusts to the techniques and ideas around cursed spirits, adjusting his strategies to beat them. Now, within more modern Jujutsu Kaisen, it's largely assumed that he has started to get a better grasp on cursed martial arts. Basically the same styles of, the hidden sword techniques that Kusakabe and Miwa use, as well as I presume there are other cursed styles of combat for martial arts and the like. You also have to take into account that in addition to your martial prowess, you can augment that with cursed tools. We've seen him do that early, and we have actually started to see him more recently in the manga start to use cursed tools. Whether that will be very effective or not is going to depend more, I think, on the tool than him, because he seems to fit so well with it. But nonetheless, it seems to be kind of a counterbalance. He has no technique, but he's so good at combat. But there is something else to think about in this regard. His bond with Riem and Sukuna was one of the things that made him such a prime target for everyone. And the thing about that is that Sukuna is scary, and we can have a whole other discussion at some point about whether Sukuna actually should be or not, because I think there's a lot of merit to discussing that. But for most sorcerers and every cursed spirit that he's ever come across, Sukuna is a terrifying, almost deity-like figure. Yuji just being the host of that was off-putting to so many people. You also have to consider the fact that Sukuna's presence within him was enough to awaken his own cursed energy. And yes, that is important to note. It's not Sukuna's cursed energy he's using, it's his own. But then there was an interesting point that was made by Gojo, of all people, about why Yuji could be the strongest. Now, technically these are from two different episodes. One is that he was talking to Ijichi and he thought that Yuji would be on the same level as Yuta and Hikari. I genuinely have no idea why he thought that, because despite everything that I've said about Yuji's prowess as a learner and a combatant, he does not display any of the abnormal abilities that those two characters possess. And the reason that I think that is odd is the reason that he said that is because he thinks for some reason Yuji would have eventually developed Sukuna's curse technique. He never did, and it's a bit difficult to say if this was Gege thought he was going to give Yuji that ability and decided against it. He was going to do it later and we just never got around to it. Or Gojo was always supposed to be wrong. Now, I will point out Gojo has been wrong in this series. Aside from getting, sealed in a box, because that's always such a great thing to reference, Gojo has been repeatedly wrong about people before, like near consistently. If anything, he's a pretty bad judge of people's potential for doing things, because he has such a skewed sense of his own potential. We see it with Megami, we've seen it with Yuji, we've seen it back with Geto. He just doesn't seem to fully be able not to relate to people. I do think he cares about people. I never got on board with the he's a psychopath thing. That's not true. But what is fundamental is that I don't think he can always relate to them in regards to their abilities. How he looks at people, how he views them, how he respects them, that's all separate from the fact that his six eyes and then the way he looks at himself tell him very different things about people. And even if somebody has the potential to reach whatever he's seeing, Yuji becoming like Yuta, Gojo being on par with him, those things aren't true in the moment. They're only what the six eyes tell him could be. And I think that is a big skewing difference. Now, does that technically mean Yuji could be on par with them? Absolutely. Will he be? Probably not, because if you've read even just the manga, you're probably well aware that while Yuji has some of the best fight scenes and all-around capabilities, he is not on par with so many of the characters in this series. So he is nowhere near the weakest sorcerer, but he's nowhere near the strongest either. So I think that does make him a good character, but what do you think? Do you think Yuji should be stronger? Do you think it's okay where he is right now? Leave your thoughts in the comments, because I genuinely want to have a discussion around this.